What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. Hope you're all doing well. Tonight, it is Thursday evening, July 18th. We're going to be continuing our 32-team projection series. We've moved roughly halfway through here, and we're just going to be finishing up the AFC South. I have Jacksonville, which we're covering in this video, and then Tennessee. I'll knock that out and get that updated for you guys. But yeah, we're just going through about 15 to 20 minutes per team, and we open up my projection document, which you guys can get access to on thefantasyfellowship.com, offering $10 membership, which gets you inside to all my dynasty rankings, my projections, my articles, my data, and everything that I put on there for you guys. But let's and what I usually do here is I start with the 2023 review, and then we'll talk about each position going forward and tell you guys what I'm thinking about for each player at each position for fantasy football. We'll start here, and let me just kind of do some zooming in here. The Jags, man. I just want to pull up their stats from last year real quick. Where are we? So, interesting year 2023 for the Jags last year. They actually started the season really, really good. And then injuries happened, and they just couldn't keep winning games. So it looks like they started the year 8-3, and then they finished the year with 5 losses in their last 6 games. So this was I think they were the number 1 seed before they went on this big losing streak to end the season. So 2023 review, like there's actually some growth in this team from 2022. And, of course, we have Doug Peterson, Press Taylor, these guys coming back for their 3rd season. The offense actually grew in year 2, specifically in the passing game. And we saw 66.45% completion percentage from the quarterbacks. We saw almost 4,400 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. The thing that regressed quite a bit was the running game. They ran the ball a little bit more, 453 carries to 458 the year before. But not even 1,700 yards, 3.63 yards per carry. That's a big problem. Travis Etienne had 3.78 yards per carry. The offensive line definitely needs some help. They did maintain their touchdowns, though. So they ran the ball the same amount, didn't have the success running the ball in yards per carry and efficiency, but they still managed to cash in on those rushing touchdowns. And then from a passing standpoint, they improved a little bit in completion percentage. They threw for a little bit more yards. They also threw the ball 24 more times than 2022. Touchdowns were close, 22 touchdowns to 25 the year before. They just had a few more turnovers in the interception column, and they just didn't run the ball as well as they did in 2022. But despite all that, there's room for growth. I think you're looking at a lot of injuries for Trevor Lawrence last year. I believe he had a concussion and ankle injuries. You also had Christian Kirk go down halfway through the season and kind of limit what the offense can move the ball with. And then I don't know if Calvin Ridley was a great fit for this offense. We can talk about that later. But the offense left more to be desired. You had Calvin Ridley at wide receiver 2. You also had Zay Jones out there. They didn't really have a lot of firepower after that. So 2023, it was a promising year, a pretty rough finish for these guys here, but I'm willing to kind of chalk that up as just kind of injuries hit these guys on the offensive side of the ball. I think coming into 2024, though, they're looking good. They're looking better on both sides of the ball, and I think they're going to return more toward. I mean, they still went 9-8 last year. We're talking about them playing not great, so I still think they're an 11-win team probably. But overall, 2023, I'm not going to get too disappointed in what they didn't do. I think they were playing well, and kind of time just got up to them. So we'll move on, though. Let's talk about the quarterbacks here. Trevor Lawrence is back. He got paid this offseason, which is a good thing to get out of the way for the Jags. But I have Trevor Lawrence ranked pretty highly here. I have him basically career highs in pretty much every category. I have him throwing 590 passes, almost 67% completion, about 4,355 yards, 7.38 yards per attempt, up to 27 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and he still runs the ball quite a bit. So 75 rushing attempts, 365 yards, and 3 touchdowns, which is kind of what he's been doing the last few years. If we look, I'm going to ignore his rookie season, and we'll just look at what he's done in the last couple of years. So almost 300 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. Last year, 339 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I think, he has that rushing floor that you're looking for from a quarterback for a QB1. And if you look at his numbers last year, he was QB12. He ended up missing, I think, a game, and he was kind of injured for a few of those games. So he's still a QB1 despite losing Christian Kirk and being dinged up throughout the year. The year before that, in 2022, he was QB7. So I honestly, I think that's kind of his range, QB7 to 12. I think he's a sneaky QB1 option. So he's projecting out very well for me, because I like the offensive upgrades that they made at the receiver position, and they still have Etienne and Evan Engram there. But I really like what they did here for Trevor Lawrence. And then they brought in Mac Jones to be the QB2. If we see Mac Jones playing, something went wrong. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. But I really, really like Trevor Lawrence this year. I think we're going to see him blossom this year back into like a fringe top 5 QB. I have him here at QB8. If he throws for 30 some touchdowns and he runs for 4 or 5, like that's going to push him up into the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks. So I like Trevor Lawrence a lot. I think he's probably one of the best values at the quarterback position this year. But that's enough on QB. Let's quick talk about the running backs. Travis Etienne is back. Dearness Johnson, Tank Bigsby. They drafted Keelan Robinson. And then I just have a ghost RB5 here in case they add someone or someone's making noise in training camp. But it's all Travis Etienne. And last year they showed us that. 267 carries, 220 the year before. It's looking pretty good for Travis Etienne. He ran for 1,000 yards the last 2 seasons. No, my bad. The year before. Yeah, so where's my numbers? I have 2 seasons of 1,000 yards for Travis Etienne, 1,125 in 2022 and just over 1,000 last year. But the volume for him, 267 carries, 58 receptions. I'm projecting a little bit decline in his carries, 240 rushing attempts, but I have his yards right up there at 1,025. I'm expecting more efficiency in the yards per carry. 8 rushing touchdowns. That's down from 11 last year. I think he ran a little hot with touchdowns, and that's actually a reason why Trevor Lawrence didn't look as good as his numbers could have been, because they were running for a lot of touchdowns with Travis Etienne in the red zone. And then I have his numbers coming down just a little bit in the receiving column. I have him at 50 catches, 75 targets, about 400 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he's still, to me, the bell cow back here. And it's honestly just because the backups aren't very good. Like, I actually like Dearness Johnson as a backup, but Tank Bigsby just did not look good in any capacity last year. He was actually quite bad. One of the worst running backs in the league last year. 132 rushing yards on 50 carries. That's 2.64 yards per carry. He also caused a handful of turnovers, whether he's dropping balls for interceptions or fumbling or whatever. But Bigsby, I don't expect him to eat into the workload here. I do expect a running back to come in for breathing duties, just to give Etienne some rest. But Dearness Johnson, Tank Bigsby, those are the 2 primary backups. I'm not really excited about either one. If Etienne does miss time, it's going to be a committee. And keep an eye on this Keelan Robinson. He was an interesting player from Texas who's just been back. He's been behind some really good running backs the last few years. He's a speedy guy. He's a smaller guy, and he can be a home run threat. I think he might make the team based on his special teams ability. But we'll keep an eye on him for training camp and preseason. But it's all about Travis Etienne here. And, I mean, again, 220 touches the year before, 267 last year, 58 catches last year, 35 the year before. Like, we're locking ourselves into a lot of touches and a good offense here. So Travis Etienne is RB8 for me. I think you should be continuing to draft him. It wouldn't surprise me if he is a top 5 running back this year, because all he needs is more breakaway runs and his yards per carry to kind of go back into the 4.5s. But he's such involved as a receiver that I think you want to circle his volume and say, yeah, I want the guy that's getting all those touches. My touch points calculator here, which it calculates a rushing attempt as worth like 0.58 PPR fantasy points, and a target's like 1.62 or something like that. And Etienne comes out as RB5. So you want to follow the touches there. Draft Travis Etienne. He can be your RB1, no problem. We'll move on to the wide receivers here. And like I mentioned before, they did kind of retool this room here. They have Christian Kirk, who's back and healthy, drafted Brian Thomas in the 1st round, paid Gabe Davis to come down here and stretch the field. They also brought in Devin Duvernay for special teams and kind of just like gadgety role type stuff. I thought Parker Washington was fine in moments last year, and then we'll see if Josh Cephas makes the team. But it's a good group, especially the top 3 guys. I think the Jags want to run a lot of 3 wide receiver stuff. Gabe Davis can block really well, so he's going to be probably going to lead the team in snaps this year, and he's going to continue to bring that deep ball element and kind of be a red zone threat. And honestly, I think he's going to be a better Calvin Ridley role type player, like a guy who can be out there and block, because Calvin Ridley doesn't do that very much. but it's also a bigger body target for Trevor Lawrence to throw the ball to in the red zone, and the deep ball is still going to be there. So I like Gabe Davis, probably not for fantasy so much. I think he's more of a best ball player. You're not going to feel comfortable starting Gabe Davis in your redraft league every week, but you might feel comfortable starting Brian Thomas. I think for sure you're going to feel good about starting Christian Kirk every week. I think he profiles as a wide receiver too, but you can get him easily as your wide receiver 3 or 4 in a lot of drafts right now. So I like Christian Kirk a ton. I have him at 90 catches, 130 targets, about 1,100 yards and 7 receiving touchdowns. I don't think there's any question who the wide receiver 1 is this year. Last year coming into the year, we were kind of torn. Is it Ridley? Is it Kirk? I think we're back squarely in the Christian Kirk wide receiver 1 category for the Jags. I think I've read these already, but 90 catches, 130 targets, 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to look really, really good this year and be the number 2 receiver that can step up for Trevor Lawrence. 67 receptions, 105 targets, about 885 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I think he's also going to complement Gabe Davis in the red zone. And, man, it's going to be tough when you have a 3 wide receiver set out there, and you got Engram, you got Etienne in the backfield, you got 2 tall, go up and get it receivers on the outside and Christian Kirk and Evan Engram in the middle. It's going to present a lot of matchup problems. So I'm very excited for the touchdown upside of Trevor Lawrence this year because I like his weapons to grab those touchdowns. So I'm drafting Brian Thomas as like my 4th or 5th wide receiver, a guy that I want to put on my bench for a redraft league. Like you put this guy away and the first week or two, we're going to know if we have something pretty nice here. So I'm continuing to draft Brian Thomas. You can maybe add Gabe Davis late in your redraft league, but I like him better in a best ball format where I don't have to worry about starting him. And then we'll keep an eye out for wide receiver 4 or 5. It's between Duvernay and Parker Washington, but we don't really need to spend a lot of time talking about those guys. I have Christian Kirk coming in at wide receiver 19, which feels pretty good. If I scroll a little bit farther down the list, I have Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver 41. And a little bit farther is Gabe Davis at wide receiver 66. So Kirk and Thomas are both priorities, I would say, right now in draft because I'm excited about this offense. And then we'll finish up with the tight ends here. You have Evan Engram back, and dude finished as the tight end number 2 last year, 143 targets to lead the team, a whopping 114 receptions, 963 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He was tight end 2 last year. Now, all these numbers, they kind of have to come down with a healthy Kirk and added receiver weapons, but he still presents a top 5 upside at the position. He's got good chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. They want him around. I have him at 90 catches, 125 targets, 905 yards, and 5 touchdowns. To me, he is the second receiver on this team. So last year we debated, is it Kirk? Is it Ridley? Well, it's Kirk, Engram, and then I would say Brian Thomas, Gabe Davis. That's the pecking order for targets in 2024. But Ingram's a good deal, man. He's going as like the tight ends 7, 8 off the board, usually behind Kyle Pitts. He's right next to George Kittle in that kind of range. And honestly, I prefer Evan Engram to George Kittle just because he's more consistent in a redraft league. Maybe you prefer Kittle in a best ball format because he's got those big games. But Engram also has those big games. So I'm all in on Evan Engram. I think Brenton Strange, Luke Farrell, we'll keep an eye on those guys. But it's clearly Evan Ingram's job here. And I think this whole team's a target. The way that I'm attacking Jacksonville, I guess before I get into that, I'll show you guys where I have Evan Engram this year. I have him as my tight end 7. So again, like I said, right after Kyle Pitts, I'm looking for Evan Engram. And if I do miss out on one of these top 6 tight ends and I don't have Kirk or I don't have Etienne on my team, I think he presents a really nice option to get a good piece of an offense. So we'll finish up with a 2024 recap, man. Like, I think the Jags are in really good position to bounce back and win the AFC South this year. I think if I had to pick a team to win the AFC South, I think it's Jacksonville. I'm not worried about their offense. It's going to come down to the defensive side of the ball, which was pretty bad at times last year. And does that offensive line improve and help them run the ball better? Because last year it was tough running the football. So, and you know, if the defense is bad and they can't run the football, like that leads back to Trevor Lawrence, man, like just wanting him out there and throwing a lot of passes in some tough games. So the way I'm attacking this is, you know, Etienne usually goes before Christian Kirk. If you need to run it, if you say you start, you know, 2 receivers and you need a running back round 3, that's where Etienne comes into play. I think if you want to wait for Kirk round 4, that's fine. Round 4, 5. And then if you're in a 1 QB redraft league, man, just wait for Trevor Lawrence. You can get Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff. You can get Trevor Lawrence and Tua. You can get Trevor Lawrence and one of the rookie QBs. I think that's a way to play it too. But I'm a big fan of just getting the head of the team, Trevor Lawrence, and I think you're going to get everything that you like. So draft Christian Kirk, draft Brian Thomas, and then draft Evan Engram. So very bullish on the Jags. Curious what you guys think below in the comments. Let me know, you guys targeting any Jags this season, because it feels really good for a bounce back opportunity for me. I'm going to take the over on their wins. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for hanging out with me and watching the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you guys are new. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.